Halo 3 is considered a masterpiece of the Xbox 360 era of gaming, being seen as a satisfying conclusion to the Bungie trilogy, with a beloved campaign, a revolutionary multiplayer that would have a solid player base even into the mid-2010s, a variety of customization features both for the characters and game settings, and never before seen features like Forge and Theater mode. Unfortunately, looking back at it, Halo 3 also has the honour of having the worst story in the original trilogy. And out of Halo 1, 2 and 3, I would consider Halo 3 to be the one where the story just doesn't really make a lot of sense when you hold it under more scrutiny. After the torturous development of Halo 2, which was supposed to be the final game of the series, many of the story beats and ideas that were supposed to fit into Halo 2 had to be cut due to time and resource issues. As such, a lot of these story beats would be incorporated into the story of Halo 3, but it seems that many of the story beats just don't make sense, on top of the script having some very debatable lines and scenes. For a start, let's look at the beginning of the story. By the time that the game starts, the Forerunner key ship that Truth is in has arrived in the Earth's atmosphere, as seen at the end of Halo 2. Master Chief then jumps off and is then rescued later in the day by Sergeant Johnson and the Arbiter. Now, this doesn't seem too weird, right? Well, in the Halo universe, different ships can travel at different speeds through slipspace, depending on the mass of the ship, the sophistication of the slipspace engine, and the power of the ship itself. Now, during the Bungie era, the general consensus is that the Covenant, due to the power of their ships and their technological advancements, can travel quicker through slipspace than the UNSC. And by that same reasoning, the Forerunner ships can travel a lot faster than the Covenant ships. So how is Johnson, Arbiter and Miranda Keyes here? When we saw them, they were busy dealing with Tartarus while the key ship jumped into slipspace, and had to deal with the Loyalist forces and trying to contain the flood. So they'd already be severely delayed in finding a ship and jumping after the key ship. Yet, by the time the Chief is rescued, Johnson and Arbiter with the Marines, and Miranda has apparently been leading UNSC forces in Africa and planning a counterattack with Lord Hood for some time. When really, based on how the cutscenes line up between Halo 2 and Halo 3, they should really still be in slipspace pursuing truth. Another thing that is present here is that at random times Cortana will just randomly appear to talk to the player. Now at this moment Cortana is a prisoner of the Gravemind, keeping her from escaping and reaching out into the galaxy. This is the reason she has to send a message on a Flood ship later to talk to the UNSC about the Ark, because that's the only way she can communicate with anyone, through a physical message. So it makes it all the more strange that these moments keep happening. Now one explanation that could possibly make sense is that these are just hallucinations from Chief. After all, he's been through a lot, and Cortana is one of the few friends he has. So maybe he's just hallucinating her because he feels guilty about leaving her. Well, that would be a good explanation if it wasn't for the fact that these are actual messages that Cortana can apparently just send across the galaxy whenever she wants. During one of these messages, a Marine makes a comment that Chief's vitals registered as KIA during it.
Sir, you okay?
Your vitals just pinged KIA.
Showing that not only is he getting these messages, but they are affecting his armor and physical health as well. But let's look at a more plausible theory. Let's say that this is the Gravemind trying to torture Chief, using its advanced knowledge and technology in order to send out all of these messages. So the Gravemind here has the ability to, from the opposite side of the galaxy, physically interact and manipulate machinery such as Chief's armor, and yet it never bothers to take control of Chief or any of the ships later in the game once truth is dealt with, and it wants to spread to the UNSC and Covenant forces. Yeah, the Flood in this game make no sense in terms of what they should have been able to accomplish, and I'll get onto that in a bit. So after getting rescued, listening to Miranda give some very vague fighting instructions.
Ma'am, squad leaders are requesting a rally point. Where should they go?
To war.
We just lost the perimeter cameras.
Motion trackers?
They're down or we're not receiving, can't tell.
Any of our birds squawking?
No, ma'am. Wait, Overwatch has contacts. Phantoms closing on our position.
Any birds less than 5 minutes out? Bring them in. Tell everything else to scatter.
Aye, aye. Pelicans are gonna take extra time to load.
Fighting off the Covenant so the UNSC at Crow's Nest can escape, and then rallying the UNSC forces to head towards the portal, we're told that Chief needs to disable the anti-air guns so that a bombing run can commence on Truth's ship. Why? The Forerunner key ship isn't some small Pelican or Phantom, it's a really big ship, and it's just sitting there in the exact same spot. I struggle to understand how the UNSC wouldn't be able to just shoot this thing with Mach cannons from further away, especially as these are ships that can use their weapons in orbit, and they would be able to move out of the way of any anti-air cannons. But alright, you want to hit this thing with everything you can. Mach cannons, turret fire, bombs from the longsword bombers, everything, and you need to get rid of this thing for the longsword bombers. So why not just use a Mach cannon round on the anti-aircraft turret and destroy it instantly? Again, with it being immobile, their mobility, and the use of AIs to make complex calculations possible, a frigate wouldn't be in danger and could remove this problem instantly, meaning that they would be able to do this attack far quicker than waiting on the Chief to make his way over there and do everything. So after the portal activates, the Flood sends a ship to Earth, and Chief speaks to Arbiter for the first and only time in the campaign.
What is it? More brutes?
Worse.
Not only is it the first and only time Chief speaks to him, it's also a really dumb conversation. Arbiter has an equal amount of experience dealing with the Flood. He should know that the Covenant ship covered in slime and dripping smog isn't the brutes. It's another dumb line in the script to try and be cool and hype up the Flood to players that haven't played the previous games, with the unfortunate side effect that people who do know what's going on just think the Arbiter comes across as a bit of a dumbass. Now, in the mission, Miranda says,
"Find the crashed Flood ship. Overload its engine core. We either destroy this city or risk losing the entire planet."
It's a pretty sensible move. The Flood is here, it will focus on spreading as far as they can, and Chief knows just how bad these things are. So if you destroy the reactor and essentially plasma nuke the local area, all the shipmaster would need to do is glass the areas where the explosion didn't reach and it would be contained. But for some reason the reactor is never detonated. You find the Cortana message, get rescued, and then you have to watch as Shipmaster has to go around glassing every single area manually, taking a lot of time and resources away from hunting truth and stopping the Ark from firing, all because the game randomly forgets the whole point of the mission. Now, the Flood in this game in general are very weird, as in no one seems to know what to do with them except during the key moments in the campaign. If they're not being used to push the main plot forward on screen, they're just kind of frozen off screen not doing anything. The Flood exists to spread and infect as many living organisms as possible, and can even assimilate entire planets if given enough time. Yet, Gravemind never bothers to send any ships to any other planet, which would allow the Flood to continue if they get destroyed on the Ark, which it knew was a possibility that Cortana had cooked up. It just takes every single Flood form on High Charity and rushes to the Ark. Yes, it wants to stop the firing of the rings as much as the good guys, but had it sent some Flood to some other worlds as well, it would have been able to continue its goal of taking over the galaxy long after Halo 3 concluded. On top of this, despite the Ark being outside the galaxy, and despite the only portal to it being on Earth, Gravemind somehow slip space jumps there without going to Earth. Third-party material attempts to justify this by saying that it used advanced unstable technology to jump from Mars to the Ark directly, but this just raises even more questions. Why was High Charity near Mars in the first place? If it wanted to get to the Ark immediately, why wouldn't it just jump to Earth first, give it the opportunity to consume the planet along the way? Why would it risk using this unstable technology in the first place? It causes High Charity to crash land into the Ark. If it just went through the portal on Earth and didn't waste time flying past Mars for whatever reason, it would have appeared in orbit, allowing it more control and being able to direct its army instead of randomly flinging escape pods around and hoping it stops the rings in time. This is also extremely detrimental to it, because now that High Charity has crashed, the Flood can't really do anything more, can it? Yes, it could try and spread across the Ark, but as long as the UNSC and the Separatists do a quarantine of the Ark and the portal to it, destroying any ships that attempt to lift off, the Flood are just kind of stuck here, aren't they? Unable to really grow and expand and constantly being hunted by Sentinels, which would be in much greater numbers because the Ark is much bigger than the Halo rings. On top of this, despite knowing that Truth intends on firing the rings and that the UNSC and Separatist allies wish to stop him, Gravemind decides to fight them instead of helping them reach the Citadel, only helping once the rings start to activate, nearly jeopardizing the galaxy and itself for no reason. The Gravemind later uses its vast tentacles to attack the Chief and Arbiter, yet apparently never bothered to use these tentacles to stop Truth. But even if it took time to reach the Citadel and it only arrived after the Chief stopped Truth, there's no reason why it wouldn't kill the two of them right here, right now, especially considering how dangerous Chief is to its survival. But instead it just leaves them and sends the Flood forces against them. You know, the Flood forces these two have had no problems fighting in the past. In summary, despite being made of billions of minds full of millions of ideas and tactics, having access to ships that can jump to anywhere in the galaxy to spread itself and continue its mission, possessing a spaceship the size of a moon, and being in the perfect position to backstab everything in the galaxy, Gravemind somehow fails to make any strategically sound moves, both in a military sense and a survival sense. It essentially destroys the only thing capable of transporting its army when it could have just used another portal it was right next to, and it leaves itself stranded on a world where everything is trying to kill it and vastly outguns it, making the Flood look really, really dumb. Talking about really, really dumb, Truth is also drinking from the same lead-filled water as the Gravemind, because Truth apparently didn't bother to capture any humans with him throughout his entire campaign on Earth and on the the Ark. He waited right until the end, when he has barely any forces left and the Covenant is on its deathbed, before deciding to capture Johnson. Meaning had Johnson's squad succeeded and they couldn't capture anyone in his squad, Truth would have just been sat in the control room unable to do anything but sulk. Speaking of Johnson being captured, doesn't Miranda Keyes' death seem incredibly contrived? So on top of Truth waiting until the last minute to capture a human, he just so happens to capture the one human Miranda is close to, causing her to hesitate when it comes to killing him. On top of this, despite the Covenant being just stragglers at this point, no other UNSC or Separatist forces attempt to join her as she tries to stop Truth. They all decide to just wait outside and do nothing. She also chooses to crash straight into the control room instead of using any of the Pelican's weaponry to eliminate the Covenant forces, forcing her to fight a group of Covenant with insufficient weaponry and being overwhelmed. Yeah, pretty dumb way to kill off a character for drama. After stopping Truth and escaping from the Flood, Chief realizes that they need Cortana for her codex to fire the half-made Halo ring, which would explode and damage the Ark, decimating the Flood forces by killing the Gravemind. And as he enters High Charity, Gravemind doesn't exactly seem to know what he wants to do with Chief. It proceeds to send wave after wave of Flood after him, showing that he does want to kill him, but never bothers to use its tentacles on him or to keep its fleshy doors closed, just allowing Chief to wander wherever he wants. It also never bothers to set up any ambushes where it's keeping Cortana, allowing her to be easily rescued after revealing her plan. And so we reach the final mission, where the gang attempts to ignite the Halo ring early and destroy a large section of the Ark, killing the Flood with it. For some reason, all of the UNSC and Separatist forces decide to evacuate except for Johnson. This forces Johnson to have to park the frigate, a vehicle that has a slip space drive and the ability to leave the Ark all alone by itself. This is already a stupid thing to do, but what's worse is how the Flood responds to an available, unguarded escape ship. For some reason, the Gravemind never attempts to use the Flood to try and commandeer it. The frigate is just left alone, completely untouched. So despite it being the only form of salvation the Gravemind and Chief's gang has of escaping the Ark's attempted destruction, the Flood never try and use it to escape, and the Sentinels never try and destroy it to stop the Flood from spreading. Overall, I feel like the biggest issue with this game is the fact that it was trying to use a baseline plot that was intended for Halo 2 and had to stretch it out. In the original Halo 2, after Chief gets in the key ship and the Arbiter stops the Halo from firing, Chief and the Arbiter would arrive on Earth, stop Truth from using the Ark, and then the game would be over. Humanity would celebrate their win over the Covenant and the war finally ending for them, and the Arbiter would lead the Separatist forces in eliminating the Loyalists. But the Flood was never defeated. In fact, the final scene of the game, and for Bungie's intentions at the time, the final scene of the Halo franchise, we would have seen the end scene in the final version of Halo 2, where Gravemind begins interrogating Cortana. Now, despite being an absolutely shit scene to end your franchise on, at least we didn't know the events leading up to it. We didn't know if the Gravemind had fully captured High Charity, or how long it took, or if it lost a bunch of its combat capabilities escaping the ring and fighting the massive Covenant fleet, or if Cortana would be able to detonate the In-Armored and stop the threat there. There's a variety of reasons that the Gravemind could be confined to High Charity and hasn't attempted to invade the galaxy yet if this is the final scene in this context. But obviously Bungie didn't get to make the game they wanted, and so they made Halo 3. And to make the campaign more memorable, replayable, and of a satisfying length, they made the Ark into the portal that would take them to the Ark, so Truth could escape and prolong the game. And knowing that it still wouldn't be enough content, they then had to come up with a satisfying conclusion to the Flood, completely ignoring all the possible ways the Flood should have spread in order to wrap things up in a neat little bow. I also feel like this is why Miranda's death was added. If we had followed Halo 2 as Bungie intended, the betrayal of the Elite, the reveal of the Halos and the rise of the Flood would have brought enough tragedy to the story, allowing the ending to focus on being more uplifting and action focused. However, in Halo 3 there isn't a lot of tragedy present throughout the game, so they decided to kill off Miranda and Johnson to bring a bit of drama to the story. And unfortunately Johnson's death is the only one that works. And so that ends my in-depth look at the Halo 3 story, a story that feels epic and has great set designs and a lot of memorable moments. But when you look back and try and see how all of these moments came to be in the storyline, they just don't seem to make sense. And from my perspective, makes this story not only one of the worst stories of Halo, but the worst way to end the trilogy on. Thanks for watching, lads and lasses. If you enjoyed this video, please consider liking, subscribing and checking out some of my other videos. Sharing always helps, and if you're feeling really generous, please consider my Patreon or YouTube membership. I also have a Twitter and occasionally I do live streams. But overall, I just hope you had a great day and hopefully I will see you in the next video.